There is a particular kind of suffering that many people experience today, yet few truly understand. It is not loud. It does not always appear as visible despair or dramatic pain. Instead, it manifests as something far more subtle and far more unsettling. A quiet sense of emptiness. You wake up in the morning, and life continues as usual. You go to work. You speak to people. You fulfill your responsibilities. On the surface, everything appears normal. And yet, somewhere deep within, there is a strange feeling that something essential is missing. It is as if life is happening around you, but not truly through you. Many people attempt to explain this emptiness in simple ways. They say it is stress. They say it is boredom. Some call it depression, while others blame modern society, technology, or the pressures of daily life. But in many cases, the emptiness has a far deeper origin. It comes from a separation between who you truly are and the life you are currently living. Modern civilization has created a world where individuals are constantly encouraged to adapt, conform, and perform roles. From childhood, you are taught how to behave, how to speak, how to succeed, and how to fit into society. Gradually, you learn to construct what psychology calls a persona, social mask designed to meet the expectations of the world around you. This mask is not inherently harmful. In fact, it is necessary. Without it, social life would be nearly impossible. The persona allows us to participate in society, to communicate, and to function within collective structures. However, the danger appears when the mask becomes stronger than the self behind it. Many people eventually begin to live entirely through this mask. They become the employee, the student, the parent, the partner, the achiever, the responsible citizen. They perform their roles so well that they slowly forget the deeper, more authentic parts of their personality. And when this happens, something within the psyche begins to fade. The human soul cannot survive indefinitely without authenticity. When the deeper parts of the self are ignored or suppressed, they do not simply disappear. Instead, they withdraw into the unconscious. From there, they begin to express themselves indirectly. Sometimes they appear as anxiety, sometimes as restlessness, sometimes as an unexplainable dissatisfaction with life, and often, they appear as emptiness. This emptiness is not merely the absence of meaning. It is the psyche's way of signaling that an important connection has been lost, a connection between the conscious identity, you present to the world, and the deeper self that exists within. When this connection is broken, life begins to feel strangely hollow. Achievements lose their excitement. Pleasures feel temporary. Even success may fail to bring genuine fulfillment. People may look at their lives and think, I have everything I was supposed to want, so why do I feel nothing? The answer lies in the structure of the human psyche. Every individual carries within them a vast inner world. Beneath the conscious mind exists the unconscious, an immense reservoir of instincts, emotions, forgotten experiences, archetypal images, and unrealized potentials. This inner world is not passive. It is alive. It seeks expression, integration, and recognition. When a person lives in harmony with their inner world, life possesses a sense of depth and vitality. Even challenges and suffering can feel meaningful, because they are part of a larger psychological journey. But when the inner world is ignored, life becomes mechanical. You may continue moving forward, achieving goals, and fulfilling responsibilities, yet internally something feels absent. It is similar to living in a beautifully decorated house where all the rooms are empty. From the outside, everything looks impressive, but inside, there is silence. Many people attempt to escape this silence through distraction. They immerse themselves in work, entertainment, social media, relationships, or endless forms of stimulation. Yet distraction cannot cure emptiness. It can only postpone the moment when the psyche demands attention. In fact, the more a person avoids confronting their inner world, the stronger the emptiness often becomes. Eventually, it may appear as a deep existential question. Is this really my life? This question marks an important psychological moment. Although it may feel uncomfortable, It often represents the beginning of a deeper transformation. The emptiness is not merely a problem, it is also an invitation. It is the psyche's way of calling you back to yourself. In analytical psychology, this process is known as individuation, the gradual journey toward becoming the person you were always meant to be. Individuation requires confronting the unconscious, discovering hidden aspects of the self, and integrating both the light and the shadow within your personality. But this process cannot begin until the illusion of the persona begins to crack. The feeling of emptiness is often the first sign that this illusion is no longer sufficient. Your soul is beginning to demand something more authentic. It wants meaning, depth, and psychological wholeness. And until that deeper life is discovered, the emptiness will remain, not as a punishment, but as a signal that the life you are currently living may not yet reflect the truth of who you really are. One of the greatest psychological illusions in human life is the belief that the identity we present to the world is the same as who we truly are. Most people rarely question this assumption. They move through life believing that their profession, their achievements, their roles, and their reputation define their identity. But the psyche knows something deeper. Within analytical psychology, there exists an important concept called the persona. The persona is the social mask we wear in order to function within society. It is the personality we construct so that we may be accepted, respected, and understood by others. Every human being develops a persona. From early childhood, you begin to learn which behaviors are rewarded and which are rejected. You quickly realize that certain traits bring approval, while others bring discomfort, criticism, or punishment. As a result, you naturally begin shaping your personality to fit the expectations of the environment around you. You learn to behave like the good student. Later you become the successful professional, then perhaps the responsible adult, the strong leader, or the reliable friend. With time, this mask becomes incredibly refined. In fact, it often becomes so convincing that even you begin to believe it completely. Yet the persona is not the true self. It is only a role. The danger begins when a person identifies too strongly with that role. Instead of using the persona as a tool for social interaction, they begin to live entirely within it. They become trapped inside the mask they created. This is where the feeling of emptiness begins to grow, because the deeper parts of the psyche cannot fully express themselves through a mask. The authentic self is far more complex than any social role. It contains contradictions, hidden desires, creativity, fears, instincts, and aspects of personality that may not easily fit into socially acceptable categories. When a person suppresses these elements for too long, they do not disappear. They simply move into the unconscious. And the unconscious does not remain silent forever. Imagine a person who spends their entire life trying to appear strong and successful. They build a career, achieve recognition, and maintain the image of confidence and control. To the outside world, they seem powerful and admirable, but internally, they may feel strangely disconnected from themselves. They may feel exhausted without understanding why. They may experience sudden anxiety or an unexplained sense of dissatisfaction. They may even begin to question the meaning of everything they have worked so hard to achieve. What they are experiencing is the psychological cost of living too far from their authentic self. The persona demands constant performance. It requires you to maintain a particular image, to behave in predictable ways, and to hide aspects of your personality that might disrupt that image. Over time, this becomes psychologically draining. You are constantly acting, even when you are alone. And eventually, something inside begins to rebel. The psyche longs for wholeness. It does not want to live only through the narrow identity that society approves of. It wants the full spectrum of human experience, the light and the darkness, the strength and the vulnerability, the ambition and the mystery. When these deeper elements are ignored, life loses its vitality. Many people try to solve this emptiness by improving the persona even further. They believe that if they achieve more success, gain more recognition, or create a more impressive image, the feeling of emptiness will disappear. But this approach rarely works. In fact, it often makes the problem worse, because the more energy you invest into the persona, the further you move away from the authentic self. You begin to live for appearances rather than truth. And although the world may applaud you, your inner world remains silent. The emptiness persists. This is why some individuals experience their greatest existential crisis during periods of apparent success. They reach the goals they once believed would bring fulfillment, only to discover that something essential is still missing. They may look at their lives and feel as though they are observing someone else's story. This realization can be deeply unsettling, but it is also an important psychological awakening. The emptiness is not a sign of failure. It is a signal from the unconscious that your life may have become too narrow, too restricted by external expectations. The psyche is asking for expansion, for a deeper exploration of who you truly are, beyond the roles you perform. In analytical psychology, the journey towards psychological wholeness begins when a person starts questioning the identity they have built. Who are you without your job title? Who are you beyond the expectations of family, society, or culture? What parts of yourself have you hidden, ignored, or suppressed in order to maintain your social image? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary, because the authentic self cannot emerge until the illusion of the persona begins to loosen its grip. This does not mean that the persona must be destroyed. Social roles will always be a part of life, but they must remain flexible. They must serve the individual rather than imprison them. When the persona becomes too rigid, the psyche suffers, and suffering, in many cases, appears first as emptiness. That emptiness is the voice of the unconscious reminding you that there is far more to your identity than the role you currently play in the world. Behind the mask lies a much deeper personality, one that has not yet been fully discovered, and the journey toward that discovery is one of the most important psychological adventures a human being can undertake. There is a part of the human psyche that most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. It is the side of the personality that does not fit the image we want the world to see. It contains impulses, emotions, desires, and traits that we have learned to reject or suppress. In analytical psychology, this hidden dimension of the personality is known as the shadow. Every human being possesses a shadow. It is not a sign of weakness or moral failure. It is simply the collection of all the aspects of ourselves that we have pushed out of conscious awareness. These may include anger, envy, selfishness, vulnerability, insecurity, creativity, ambition, or even strength that we were never encouraged to express. The shadow is formed gradually. From childhood, you begin to receive signals from your environment about which parts of your personality are acceptable and which are not. When a child expresses anger and is punished for it, that anger may be pushed into the unconscious. When curiosity or independence is criticized, those impulses may also be hidden. Over time, the personality splits. One part becomes the acceptable self, the version of you that fits within social expectations. This is closely connected to the persona. The other part becomes the rejected self, the shadow that lives outside conscious awareness. But the shadow does not disappear simply because it has been rejected. Instead, it continues to exist in the unconscious, influencing thoughts, emotions, and behavior in subtle ways. One of the most powerful psychological truths is this: what we refuse to see within ourselves often controls us from the shadows. When the shadow remains unconscious, it begins to express itself indirectly. Sometimes it appears through sudden emotional reactions that seem disproportionate to the situation. A small criticism may provoke intense anger. A minor failure may produce overwhelming shame. At other times, the shadow appears through projection. Projection occurs when we unconsciously attribute our own hidden traits to other people. The qualities we refuse to recognize within ourselves are seen everywhere in the outside world. For example, a person who has suppressed their own aggression may constantly perceive hostility in others. Someone who has denied their ambition may feel irritated by the success of others. What they are actually encountering is their own shadow reflected back to them. But there is another consequence of rejecting the shadow that is even more subtle. When too much of the personality is pushed into the unconscious, the conscious identity becomes thin and incomplete. The person begins to feel strangely hollow, as though important parts of their vitality have been lost. This is one of the hidden roots of inner emptiness. The psyche cannot achieve wholeness by accepting only the parts of itself that appear socially admirable. True psychological development requires acknowledging the full complexity of human nature. Light and darkness exist within everyone. Strength and weakness, compassion and selfishness, creativity and destruction. When a person tries to live only on the side of light, they unconsciously abandon a large portion of their psychological energy. That lost energy retreats into the shadow, and when the conscious personality becomes too disconnected from this energy, life begins to feel dull and lifeless. This is why individuals who are overly identified with being good, perfect, or acceptable often experience a deep sense of emptiness. They have built a personality that excludes large parts of their natural instincts and emotions. They may appear balanced and admirable to others, but internally they feel disconnected from their own vitality. The shadow contains not only the traits we dislike, but also many of the qualities that give life its intensity and creativity. Within the shadow you may find courage that was never allowed to emerge, passion that was suppressed, authenticity that was sacrificed in order to gain acceptance. When these elements remain unconscious, the individual lives only a partial life. They follow routines. They fulfill expectations. They maintain their social image, yet something inside them remains dormant. The emptiness they feel is the absence of their own hidden potential. This realization can be uncomfortable, because confronting the shadow requires honesty. It requires admitting that the image we have constructed of ourselves may be incomplete. It requires recognizing impulses and emotions that we may have spent years trying to deny. But without this confrontation, psychological growth cannot occur. The goal of this process is not to eliminate the shadow. That would be impossible. The goal is to become aware of it. When the shadow becomes conscious, its energy can be integrated into the personality in constructive ways. Instead of unconsciously controlling behavior, it becomes a source of vitality, creativity, and depth. A person who has faced their shadow becomes more authentic. They no longer need to maintain the illusion of perfection. They become more compassionate toward others, because they understand the complexity of human nature. Most importantly, they begin to feel more alive, because the energy that was once trapped in the unconscious is now part of the conscious personality. The emptiness begins to fade. In its place appears a deeper sense of reality, a life that feels fuller, richer, and more genuine. But this transformation requires courage. The shadow is not comfortable to face. It challenges the image we have built of ourselves. Yet the individual who refuses this confrontation remains divided within. They continue living through the narrow identity of the persona, while the rest of their personality remains hidden. And in that division, the feeling of emptiness persists, because a human being cannot experience fullness, while half of their soul remains in darkness. There is a powerful force shaping the lives of most people, and yet few ever become aware of it. This force is not a person, nor a single institution. It is something far more subtle. It is the collective influence of society itself. From the moment you are born, you enter a world that already has expectations prepared for you. Before you even develop a sense of identity, the structure of society begins to guide you in particular directions. You are taught what success looks like. You are told what kind of life is respectable. You learn which dreams are realistic and which are considered foolish. Gradually, these ideas become so familiar that they begin to feel like your own. But often, they are not. They belong to the collective. Human beings are social creatures, and because of this, we possess a deep psychological need for acceptance. To be excluded from the group once meant danger, or even death in earlier stages of human evolution. As a result, the psyche has developed a powerful instinct to adapt to the expectations of the community. This instinct is not wrong. Without it, social life would collapse. Cooperation, culture, and civilization all depend on a certain level of shared values and behaviors. But there is also a hidden danger within this collective influence. When a person becomes too strongly shaped by society, they may gradually lose contact with their own individuality. They begin to live according to external definitions of meaning rather than discovering their own. At first, this process feels natural. You pursue education because it is expected. You choose a career that appears stable and respectable. You follow a life path that seems logical according to the standards of the world around you. But somewhere along the way, a quiet question may begin to form within the psyche. Is this truly my path? Many people ignore this question. They suppress it because confronting it might require difficult changes. It might mean questioning choices that have already defined years of their life. So they continue moving forward along the same road. Yet the unconscious does not forget the question. Instead, it expresses itself in more subtle ways. Life begins to feel strangely repetitive. Each day resembles the one before it. Work becomes mechanical. Goals that once felt important begin to feel strangely empty once they are achieved. The person may not understand why this is happening. After all, they are following the path that society considers successful. But success defined by the collective does not always bring fulfillment to the individual. The human psyche contains something unique in every person. Each individual carries potentials, talents, and psychological patterns that are unlike those of anyone else. The purpose of psychological development is not simply to become a well-functioning member of society. It is to become yourself. In analytical psychology, this process is called individuation. Individuation is the journey through which a person gradually discovers and integrates the deeper aspects of their personality. It involves recognizing the difference between the roles imposed by society and the authentic direction of the self. This process is rarely easy, because the moment you begin listening to your inner voice, rather than the expectations of the collective, you may feel uncertain or even isolated. Society prefers predictability. It encourages individuals to follow established paths, because these paths maintain order and stability. When someone begins questioning those paths, they may encounter resistance from family, from institutions, or even from their own internalized beliefs. Yet ignoring the call of the self carries a different kind of cost. When a person lives entirely according to external expectations, their inner world gradually becomes silent. The deeper instincts, dreams, and creative impulses of the psyche remain unexplored, and this silence eventually appears as emptiness. The person may have a stable life, a respectable career, and social approval, yet something essential feels absent. They may sense that they are living a life that was designed for someone else. This feeling does not necessarily mean that all external responsibilities must be abandoned. The path of individuation does not require rejecting society entirely. Rather, it requires becoming conscious of the difference between what society expects and what the inner self truly needs. A balanced life allows space for both, but in modern civilization, the external world often becomes overwhelmingly dominant. Technology, productivity, competition, and constant stimulation keep the attention focused outward. Rarely are individuals encouraged to explore their inner world. Rarely are they taught to listen to the quiet voice that exists beneath the noise of daily life. Without that connection, the psyche becomes unbalanced. The outer life grows larger and more complex, while the inner life remains neglected. This imbalance creates the feeling of emptiness. The soul is asking for attention. It is asking for depth rather than constant distraction. It is asking for meaning that comes from within, rather than definitions imposed by the outside world. The individual who begins to recognize this imbalance stands at an important crossroads. One path leads back into the comfortable rhythm of collective expectations. The other leads inward, toward the unknown landscape of the self. The second path requires courage, but it is also the path that leads to psychological wholeness. For the person who chooses it, life gradually begins to feel different. Decisions become guided not only by social approval but by inner alignment. Work gains meaning when it reflects personal values. Relationships become deeper when they are built on authenticity rather than roles. And the emptiness that once felt so heavy begins to transform into something else, a sense of purpose. Because when the individual begins reconnecting with the true self, life is no longer simply something that happens. It becomes something that is consciously lived. At some point in life, many individuals reach a quiet but powerful realization. They begin to sense that the emptiness they feel is not simply a temporary mood or a passing dissatisfaction. Instead, it is something deeper, a signal that their life has drifted away from their authentic center. This moment can be unsettling. For years, perhaps even decades, a person may have followed the path that seemed correct. They fulfilled responsibilities, met expectations, and built a life that appeared stable from the outside. Yet internally, something essential remained missing. When this realization emerges, it often brings with it an important question. If the life I have been living does not truly reflect who I am, then who am I really? This question marks the beginning of a profound psychological journey. In analytical psychology, the process of rediscovering the authentic self is called individuation. It is not a simple change in career, lifestyle, or habits. Rather, it is a gradual transformation in the relationship between the conscious mind and the deeper layers of the psyche. Individuation begins when a person stops running from their inner world. For many people, the inner world is unfamiliar territory. Modern life encourages constant external activity. Work, entertainment, responsibilities, and digital distractions keep the attention focused outward. Rarely are individuals encouraged to explore the depths of their own psyche. But the journey toward wholeness requires turning inward. This does not mean abandoning the external world. Instead, it means developing awareness of the forces that operate beneath conscious thought, dreams, emotions, intuitions, and unconscious patterns that shape behavior. The unconscious mind communicates through symbols. Dreams are one of the most powerful ways in which the unconscious reveals itself. While the rational mind often dismisses dreams as meaningless fragments of imagination, they frequently contain important messages about the psychological state of the individual. A recurring dream, a strange symbol, or a powerful emotional image may reflect aspects of the personality that have not yet been integrated into conscious awareness. By paying attention to these signals, a person begins to establish a dialogue with the deeper self. Another essential step in this journey is confronting the shadow. As we explored earlier, the shadow contains the parts of the personality that have been rejected or ignored. These elements often appear uncomfortable or even disturbing when they first become visible, yet they also contain enormous psychological energy. When a person begins to acknowledge these hidden aspects of themselves, they often experience an increase in vitality. They become more honest about their emotions. They recognize their fears without being controlled by them. They accept their imperfections without trying to hide behind a perfect image. This process creates a more authentic personality. Instead of living through a rigid persona, the individual becomes more flexible and real. They no longer need to maintain the illusion of perfection. They become comfortable with complexity, the complexity that exists in all human beings. Another crucial element of individuation is the discovery of personal meaning. Many people pursue goals that were never truly their own. They chase success defined by society, rather than asking what genuinely fulfills them. As a result, they may reach impressive achievements while still feeling strangely empty. The journey back to the self requires asking deeper questions. What activities make you feel alive? What ideas inspire your curiosity? What values feel meaningful even when no one else is watching? These questions cannot be answered quickly. They require patience and honesty. Sometimes the answers may challenge the structure of the life you have already built. But the purpose of individuation is not to destroy your life. It is to bring it into alignment with your inner truth. When this alignment begins to occur, something remarkable happens. The feeling of emptiness slowly begins to transform. Instead of feeling lost, the individual begins to feel curious about their own existence. Life becomes less about meeting expectations and more about exploring potential. Even difficulties begin to carry a sense of meaning. Challenges become opportunities for psychological growth. Failures become lessons, rather than signs of worthlessness. And success becomes more satisfying because it reflects something authentic, rather than something imposed. The journey toward the true self is not a straight path. It contains uncertainty, confusion, and moments of doubt. But it also contains discovery. Every time you become more aware of your inner world, you reclaim a part of yourself that was previously hidden. Every time you act according to your genuine values, rather than external pressure, you strengthen the connection to your authentic identity. And with each step in this direction, the emptiness that once dominated your life begins to lose its power. Because the human psyche longs for wholeness. When the conscious mind and the unconscious begin to communicate with one another, the individual gradually becomes more integrated. Life gains depth. Experience gains meaning. And the person who once felt empty begins to feel something very different. A quiet sense of inner direction. When people first encounter the feeling of inner emptiness, they often believe something is wrong with them. They assume the emptiness is a flaw in their personality or a failure in their life. But the truth is something very different. In many cases, the emptiness is not a defect. It is a message. It is the psyche's way of telling you that your life has lost connection with its deeper meaning. Modern society teaches people to solve problems quickly. If something feels wrong, we search for an immediate solution. We try to distract ourselves, change our environment, or fill the void with new experiences. But the emptiness of the soul cannot be solved like a simple problem. It must be understood. The first step in transforming emptiness is recognizing that it has a purpose. The psyche does not create this feeling randomly. It appears when the conscious life of the individual has become too disconnected from the deeper forces of the unconscious. In other words, the emptiness is a signal that your soul is asking for attention. For many people, this realization changes everything. Instead of trying to escape the emptiness, they begin to listen to it. They begin to ask questions they may have avoided for years. What part of myself have I neglected? What dreams have I abandoned? What emotions have I suppressed in order to maintain the image I present to the world? These questions open the door to transformation. Because once the individual begins exploring their inner world, the emptiness gradually reveals what it was trying to communicate. Often, it is asking for authenticity. Human beings possess a deep psychological need to live in alignment with their true nature. When this alignment is lost, life begins to feel mechanical. Days pass, responsibilities are fulfilled, and yet something essential remains absent. But when a person begins acting according to their deeper values and instincts, life regains its vitality. Authenticity does not mean abandoning responsibility or rejecting society. It means bringing more of your true personality into the life you are already living. It means allowing yourself to think honestly, to speak sincerely, to pursue interests that genuinely matter to you. Even small acts of authenticity can begin to restore the connection between the conscious self and the deeper psyche. Another essential step in filling the emptiness is embracing the full complexity of your personality. As we have seen, the shadow contains many aspects of the self that were once rejected. When these elements remain unconscious, they drain psychological energy from the personality. But when they are acknowledged and integrated, they become sources of strength. A person who has confronted their shadow becomes more complete. They no longer need to pretend to be perfect. They become comfortable with their own humanity. This acceptance brings a sense of inner stability. It reduces the internal conflict that often creates feelings of emptiness. Yet perhaps the most important transformation occurs when a person begins to experience life as a meaningful psychological journey. Modern culture often treats life as a sequence of goals. Education leads to career. Career leads to status. Status leads to security. But the human soul seeks something deeper than achievement alone. It seeks meaning. Meaning emerges when life is experienced as a process of growth and discovery. Every challenge becomes part of the development of the personality. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to understand something new about oneself or the world. When life is approached in this way, even difficult experiences gain value. Suffering becomes a teacher, failure becomes a guide, and the emptiness that once seemed unbearable becomes the starting point of a profound transformation, because it was the emptiness that forced the individual to ask deeper questions. It was the emptiness that revealed the limitations of the life they had been living, and it was the emptiness that pushed them toward the journey of individuation. The ultimate goal of this journey is not perfection, it is wholeness. Wholeness means accepting every dimension of the self, the light and the shadow, the strength and the vulnerability, the conscious mind and the unconscious depths. A person who achieves this integration does not necessarily live a life without difficulties. Challenges remain a natural part of existence, but their relationship with life changes. They no longer feel lost within it. They begin to sense a deeper connection between their inner world and the reality around them. Life feels real, meaningful, alive, and the emptiness that once dominated their experience gradually dissolves, not because it was forcibly removed, but because its message was finally understood. In the end, the emptiness was never your enemy. It was your guide. It was the quiet voice of the soul reminding you that you were meant to become something more than the roles you were given. You were meant to become yourself.